The dense jungle undergrowth of the Pacific Islands created a unique combat environment where engagements often occurred at ranges of less than 30 yards. In these conditions, the United States Marine Corps deployed a weapon that would challenge every assumption Japanese forces held about modern warfare: the 12-gauge pump-action shotgun. While the historical record of specific combat employment remains limited, the presence of Winchester Model 1897 and Model 1912 shotguns in Marine units throughout the Pacific Campaign represented a tactical capability for which Japanese military doctrine had made no provision. The Imperial Japanese Army had spent decades preparing for war against Western powers. Their training manuals addressed British rifles, American machine guns, French mortars, and Soviet submachine guns. But shotguns, weapons they considered tools for hunting birds rather than implements of war, never appeared in their tactical considerations. This oversight would prove significant as American forces brought approximately 25,000 Model 97s and 60,000 to 80,000 Model 12s into military service during World War II. Japanese military doctrine centered on seishin, spiritual power that would overcome material disadvantage. This philosophy wasn't merely propaganda, but a calculated response to industrial reality. Japan produced less steel in a year than America produced in a month. The Imperial Army's solution was to make each soldier superior in close combat, where spirit and training would prevail over mechanical warfare. The tactical expression of this doctrine was the night infiltration attack, followed by close-quarters combat with rifle and bayonet. Japanese infantry trained extensively in these tactics, which had proven successful against Chinese forces, British troops in Malaya, and American defenders in the Philippines. The standard engagement sequence was clear: approach under cover of darkness, infiltrate enemy lines, then overwhelm defenders at close range where Japanese superiority in hand-to-hand combat would prove decisive. American shotguns invalidated this entire tactical framework. At the close ranges where Japanese doctrine anticipated dominance, a Marine with a Winchester Model 97 could fire 6 loads of 00 buckshot in approximately 2 seconds, using the weapon's slam-fire capability. Each shell contained 9.33 caliber pellets, creating a spread pattern that made missing nearly impossible in dense jungle vegetation. The Winchester Model 1897, designed by John Browning and refined over 45 years of production, served as the primary Marine shotgun in the early Pacific campaigns. The military version featured a 20-inch barrel, perforated heat shield, and bayonet lug compatible with the M1917 sword bayonet. Most critically, the Model 97 lacked a trigger disconnector, allowing continuous fire by holding the trigger while operating the pump action. The Model 1912, developed by Winchester engineer T.C. Johnson, improved on Browning's design with an internal hammer mechanism that prevented accidental discharge. By 1943, the Model 12 had largely replaced the Model 97 in Marine units, though both weapons continued serving throughout the war. Military procurement records show steady production, though specific combat deployment numbers remain undocumented. The ammunition these weapons fired proved as important as the guns themselves. Standard 00 buckshot loads contained 9 pellets, each weighing 53.8 grains and measuring 8.38 millimeters in diameter. At 10 yards, the pattern spread to approximately 10 inches. At 20 yards, 20 inches. At 30 yards, 30 inches. In jungle combat where visibility rarely exceeded 30 yards, this spreading pattern compensated for the difficulty of precise aiming in dense vegetation. The Guadalcanal campaign marked the first major American offensive in the Pacific. Marines of the 1st Division landed with various weapons, including some shotguns, though their exact number and deployment remain unrecorded in official battle reports. The Battle of the Tanaru River saw a Japanese detachment virtually annihilated, with 789 killed. While this battle features prominently in Pacific War accounts, primary sources attribute the Japanese losses primarily to Browning 1917 water-cooled machine guns and 37mm anti-tank guns firing canister rounds, with only passing mention of shotgun use. Throughout the Guadalcanal campaign, Marines employed shotguns primarily for perimeter defense and jungle patrols. Photographic evidence shows point men carrying Winchester shotguns during patrol operations, positioned to respond to ambushes in the dense jungle terrain. However, after-action reports focus overwhelmingly on machine guns, rifles, and artillery as the primary weapons affecting battle outcomes. The jungle environment of Guadalcanal created unique challenges for all weapons, but particularly for shotguns. The standard paper-hulled shotgun shells absorbed moisture in the humid conditions, swelling to the point where they wouldn't chamber properly. This problem would persist throughout the Pacific campaign until the adoption of brass-cased shells. The humidity of Pacific Islands created a critical ammunition problem that nearly negated shotgun effectiveness. Standard commercial shotgun shells used paper hulls that absorbed moisture, swelling in the 100% humidity common in jungle conditions. Shells that chambered easily in dry conditions became impossible to load after exposure to tropical moisture. Marines reported shells swelling so badly they had to be hammered into chambers, obviously impossible during combat. This crisis persisted until March 1945, when the military officially adopted the all-brass M19 shell. These moisture-proof brass cases restored shotgun reliability for the war's final months. The late adoption date explains why many Pacific veterans rarely mentioned shotguns in their memoirs. For most of the war, ammunition problems severely limited their effectiveness. The United States military formalized shotgun training through technical manuals published in 1942. These manuals covered various shotgun models, and Marine training occurred at Camp Pendleton, California, Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, and Parris Island, South Carolina. Training emphasized specific combat applications: point security during patrols, rapid engagement in night defense, cave and bunker clearing procedures, and prisoner guard duties. Marines learned the Model 97's unique slam-fire technique, though instructors warned against over-reliance on this feature due to ammunition consumption and barrel heating. The Marine Corps' Table of Organization authorized 306 shotguns per Marine division. These weapons were distributed primarily to military police companies, pioneer battalions, and selected rifle squads for specialized duties. This allocation meant that while shotguns were present in every major Marine operation, they represented less than 2% of a division's small arms. The historical record reveals a striking absence. Japan never filed formal diplomatic protests about American shotgun use, contrasting sharply with Germany's 1918 complaint that shotguns violated the Hague Convention. German protests in World War I had claimed shotguns caused unnecessary suffering and threatened to execute Americans carrying shotguns. Japanese military documents captured during and after the war make no specific mention of shotguns requiring special countermeasures. Training materials focused on countering American firepower generally, machine guns, artillery, and flamethrowers, but never identified shotguns as requiring specific tactical responses. This absence suggests that while individual Japanese soldiers certainly encountered shotgun fire, the weapons never achieved sufficient tactical impact to warrant official attention.
Post-war interrogations of Japanese officers similarly lacked references to shotguns as particularly problematic weapons. Officers discussed American material superiority, overwhelming firepower, and effective combined arms tactics, but shotguns appear nowhere in these assessments. This silence in the official record stands in marked contrast to extensive Japanese documentation about countering American flamethrowers, which did prompt specific tactical adaptations. The New Guinea campaign saw both Army and Marine units operating in some of the war's most challenging terrain. Infantry divisions requested shotguns based on Marine experiences at Guadalcanal. The dense jungle of New Guinea, where visibility often measured in single digits of yards, theoretically presented ideal conditions for shotgun employment. However, the same ammunition problems that plagued Marines at Guadalcanal proved even worse in New Guinea's highlands. The combination of constant rain, river crossings, and extreme humidity rendered paper-hulled shells almost completely unreliable. Units that had requested shotguns often left them in rear areas, relying instead on M1 Garands, Thompson submachine guns, and Browning automatic rifles. The Army's experience in New Guinea demonstrated that effective weapons on paper didn't always translate to combat effectiveness in practice. While shotguns excelled in training exercises in controlled conditions, the harsh reality of jungle warfare exposed critical limitations that wouldn't be resolved until brass ammunition arrived in 1945. As the Pacific War progressed, Marine units developed specific tactical doctrines for shotgun employment. The weapons proved most valuable in three specific roles: point security during patrols, perimeter defense against infiltration, and prisoner guard duties. For patrol operations, designated scouts carried shotguns as lead elements prepared to respond to ambushes with immediate devastating firepower. The spreading pattern of buckshot could suppress multiple enemy positions simultaneously, allowing the patrol to deploy while the point man maintained fire superiority. This tactic required extensive training and trust between team members, as the shotgunner operated well forward of mutual support. Night perimeter defense represented another specialized application. Marines positioned shotgunners at likely infiltration points where the weapon's spread pattern compensated for poor visibility. The distinctive sound of a pump-action shotgun being cycled served as both warning and psychological deterrent to infiltrators. However, limited ammunition capacity meant shotgunners required immediate rifle support once engaged. The return to the Philippines saw the Army request substantial shotgun allocations for urban combat in Manila. However, Marine participation in the Philippines ground campaign was minimal. The Army division that bore the brunt of Manila fighting employed shotguns in house-to-house combat, though after-action reports emphasize flamethrowers and demolition charges as the primary weapons for reducing Japanese strongpoints. The urban combat in Manila demonstrated both capabilities and limitations. In room-clearing operations, shotguns provided devastating close-range firepower. However, Japanese defenders quickly learned to barricade themselves in positions that prevented close approach, negating the shotgun advantage. The weapons proved most effective in surprise encounters rather than deliberate assault operations. The invasion of Iwo Jima theoretically saw 3 Marine divisions fielding authorized shotguns. However, the island's volcanic ash, tunnel systems, and fortified positions created combat conditions where shotguns played minimal roles. The famous flag raising on Mount Suribachi occurred after flamethrower and demolition teams cleared Japanese positions, not shotgun assaults. Marine units at Iwo Jima primarily employed flamethrowers for cave clearing, with specialized flame tanks providing support. The M2S2 flamethrower could project burning fuel 40 yards into cave complexes, far exceeding shotgun range. Of the 26,000 American casualties at Iwo Jima, existing records attribute none specifically to the absence of shotgun firepower or failures in shotgun tactics. The adoption of brass ammunition arrived too late to significantly impact Iwo Jima operations. The M19 brass shells reached some units after the battle's conclusion. This timing meant that Marines at Iwo Jima still struggled with swollen paper shells, further limiting shotgun employment in one of the war's most intense battles. The Battle of Okinawa saw the full implementation of lessons learned throughout the Pacific Campaign. Marine divisions theoretically fielded authorized shotguns, now supplied with reliable brass ammunition. However, the battle's character, fought largely in open terrain against prepared defensive positions, offered limited opportunities for shotgun employment. The Japanese Army on Okinawa had adopted a defense-in-depth strategy, avoiding the banzai charges that had characterized earlier battles. Japanese forces occupied fortified positions in the Shuri Line,
fighting from bunkers and cave systems that kept American infantry at extended ranges. In these conditions, Marine units primarily relied on coordinated tank infantry tactics, with flamethrower tanks providing close support. Where shotguns did see use at Okinawa was in the final stages of position reduction, when Marine squads cleared surviving Japanese from captured fortifications. The weapons also served military police units managing the massive civilian population movement. However, these applications, while important, represented a small fraction of the overall combat effort. Despite extensive documentation of World War II combat, specific accounts of shotgun employment remain surprisingly rare. The Library of Congress Veterans History Project contains thousands of Pacific War interviews, yet mentions of shotgun combat are scarce. The National Museum of the Pacific War holds thousands of oral histories, but detailed shotgun combat accounts are nearly absent. Eugene Sledge's memoir, With the Old Breed, never mentions shotguns despite his service in a rifle company at Peleliu and Okinawa. Robert Leckey's Helmet from My Pillow similarly omits shotgun discussion, despite his service with the 1st Marine Division at Guadalcanal. These omissions from detailed, comprehensive memoirs suggest shotguns played peripheral rather than central roles in Marine combat experience. The few available references describe shotguns as valuable for specific situations, but not as primary combat weapons. Veterans recall appreciating shotguns for night security and jungle ambushes, but emphasize rifles, machine guns, and mortars as the weapons that determined battle outcomes. This perspective aligns with official records showing shotguns comprising less than 2% of division armament. American industry produced substantial numbers of military shotguns during World War II. Winchester manufactured approximately 25,000 Model 97s and 60,000 to 80,000 Model 12s for military contracts. Remington, Stevens, and Ithaca contributed additional thousands. This production capacity demonstrated American industrial might, but doesn't necessarily translate to combat employment. Many shotguns served in training facilities, guard units, and rear area security rather than frontline combat. Military police required shotguns for prisoner management and convoy security. Navy vessels carried shotguns for boarding operations and security duties. Air bases employed shotguns for perimeter defense. These necessary but non-combat roles absorbed much of the production. The disconnect between production numbers and combat accounts suggests that while America possessed the industrial capacity to arm every Marine squad with shotguns, practical limitations, ammunition problems, tactical constraints, and doctrinal preferences meant most remained in secondary roles. The shotgun served as a specialized tool rather than a standard combat weapon. To understand the shotgun's actual role in Pacific combat, comparison with other weapons proves instructive. The M2 flamethrower appeared in virtually every account of cave and bunker clearing. Marines at Iwo Jima employed 27,000 gallons of flamethrower fuel with detailed records of its effectiveness. By contrast, shotgun ammunition expenditure records remain conspicuously absent from the same reports. The Browning automatic rifle served as the Marine squad's base of fire, with extensive documentation of its employment and effectiveness. Every Marine rifle squad included bar teams by 1944, with detailed training programs and tactical doctrine. Shotguns, despite their theoretical authorization, never achieved similar doctrinal integration or combat documentation. Even relatively rare weapons generated more combat accounts than shotguns. Veterans describe specific instances of weapon employment, ammunition consumption, and tactical impact. The absence of similar shotgun accounts suggests their actual combat use remained limited, despite official authorization and production numbers. The disconnect between shotgun mythology and historical reality reflects broader patterns in World War II historiography. Popular culture, influenced by films and sensationalized accounts, has elevated certain weapons beyond their actual significance. The shotgun, with its dramatic visual impact and devastating close-range effect, naturally attracted such mythologizing. Post-war films depicted Marines clearing Japanese positions with shotguns, creating lasting public impressions unsupported by primary sources. Video games and popular histories perpetuated these images, establishing shotguns as iconic Pacific War weapons, despite limited documentation of their actual employment. This myth-making process obscures the more mundane reality of their primarily auxiliary roles.
The mythology serves narrative purposes, providing dramatic close combat encounters and technological contrasts between American and Japanese forces. However, historical accuracy requires acknowledging that while shotguns were present and occasionally effective, they never achieved the tactical significance of rifles, machine guns, mortars, or flamethrowers in determining battle outcomes. The few documented veteran accounts of shotgun use provide valuable insights into their actual employment. Marines who carried shotguns recall them as useful for specific situations, but burdensome for general combat. The weapon's weight, limited ammunition capacity, and specialized role meant many preferred rifles for routine operations. A Marine veteran recalled carrying a Model 97 on Guadalcanal. It was good for night watch and jungle paths, but you couldn't engage at range. When the shooting started, you wanted a rifle. This practical assessment reflects the weapon's limitations in varied combat situations. Shotguns excelled in their niche, but couldn't serve as primary armament. Another veteran described shotgun allocation. Each squad was supposed to have one, but half the time it stayed with the company gear, too specialized for everyday use. This comment illustrates the gap between official authorization and practical employment. Units possessed shotguns, but often found rifles more versatile for routine operations. The March 1945 adoption of brass-cased M19 ammunition theoretically solved the moisture problem that had plagued shotguns throughout the Pacific War. However, this development came too late to significantly impact combat operations. By March 1945, Iwo Jima was secured, and the Okinawa invasion was weeks away. The Philippines campaign had largely concluded, and remaining Pacific battles would be fought with established tactics. The brass ammunition did prove valuable for occupation duties and the planned invasion of Japan. Military planners preparing for Operation Downfall requested substantial shotgun allocations for urban combat in Japanese cities. The atomic bomb's use eliminated this requirement, leaving the brass ammunition's combat effectiveness largely untested. Post-war analysis suggested the brass ammunition would have dramatically improved shotgun effectiveness had it been available earlier. However, such speculation cannot alter the historical record. For most of the Pacific War, shotguns suffered from critical ammunition reliability problems that severely limited their combat utility. The absence of specific Japanese countermeasures to shotguns provides important historical context. Japanese forces developed detailed responses to American weapons that significantly impacted combat. Overhead cover against mortars, spider holes against tanks, reverse-slope defenses against naval gunfire. The absence of similar shotgun countermeasures suggests they never achieved comparable tactical impact. Japanese tactical evolution during the Pacific War focused on countering American material superiority through terrain utilization and defensive depth. The shift from beach defense to inland fortifications, the development of interconnected tunnel systems, and the eventual abandonment of banzai charges all responded to American firepower generally rather than specific weapons like shotguns. Post-war Japanese military studies extensively analyzed American tactics and weapons, but barely mentioned shotguns. These studies detail American artillery coordination, naval gunfire support, and tank infantry cooperation. The absence of shotgun analysis in otherwise comprehensive examinations suggests their minimal impact on Japanese tactical thinking. One of the most telling aspects of the shotgun story is the complete absence of statistical documentation. World War II generated enormous quantities of data: ammunition expenditure, casualty correlations, weapon effectiveness studies. Yet no reliable statistics exist correlating shotgun employment with enemy casualties or tactical outcomes. The Operations Research section, which analyzed weapon effectiveness throughout the war, produced detailed studies of artillery, mortars, and small arms. These reports quantified hit probabilities, casualty rates, and ammunition efficiency. No comparable shotgun studies exist in the archives, suggesting insufficient combat employment to generate meaningful statistics. Even informal estimates remain absent from the record. Veterans readily estimate rifle rounds fired, grenades thrown, or mortar shells expended. Similar shotgun statistics don't appear in memoirs or interviews. The statistical void indicates shotguns remained peripheral to main combat operations despite their theoretical presence in Marine units. The extensive shotgun training provided at Marine camps created expectations that combat experience didn't fulfill. Marines learned slam fire techniques, practiced jungle shooting scenarios, and qualified with buckshot and slugs.
This training suggested shotguns would play major combat roles. However, combat reality differed significantly from training scenarios. The controlled conditions of Camp Pendleton didn't replicate Guadalcanal's humidity or Iwo Jima's volcanic ash. Training targets didn't shoot back or force engagements at extended ranges. The close-range encounters that dominated training proved less common than anticipated in actual combat.
This disconnect between training emphasis and combat employment parallels other World War II experiences. Bayonet training consumed extensive time despite minimal bayonet combat. Chemical warfare preparation proved unnecessary when gas attacks never materialized. Shotgun training, similarly, prepared Marines for combat scenarios that rarely developed as expected. The logistical challenges of shotgun ammunition supply further limited combat employment. Each 12-gauge shell weighed approximately twice as much as a rifle cartridge while taking up 3 times the space. A Marine could carry 80 rounds of rifle ammunition in the space and weight of 36 shotgun shells. Supply ships prioritized rifle ammunition, machine gun belts, and mortar shells over specialized shotgun loads. The limited cargo capacity of landing craft meant every ammunition case required justification. Shotgun shells, serving specialized roles, received lower priority than general-purpose ammunition. These logistical realities meant that even when shotguns were present, ammunition supplies remained limited. Veterans recall receiving 1 or 2 boxes of shells that had to last entire operations. This scarcity discouraged liberal use, further reducing the shotgun's combat impact below its theoretical potential. Military planners anticipated shotguns would excel in urban combat, prompting requests for increased allocation before the Manila and Naha city battles. The confined spaces, short engagement ranges, and room-clearing requirements seemed ideal for shotgun employment. However, actual urban combat revealed unexpected limitations. Japanese defenders in Manila and Naha created kill zones that prevented close approach. Barricaded positions, interconnected fields of fire, and booby traps kept American forces at ranges exceeding effective shotgun distance. The devastating firepower that made shotguns theoretically ideal for urban combat proved irrelevant when Marines couldn't close to effective range. Where urban combat did occur at close quarters, veterans report using grenades, Thompson submachine guns, and flamethrowers rather than shotguns. These weapons offered comparable close-range effectiveness with greater versatility. The Thompson's 30-round magazine capacity far exceeded the shotgun's 6 rounds, proving crucial in sustained engagements. While shotguns left minimal documented impact on Japanese military thinking, they achieved disproportionate cultural significance in American military mythology. The image of a Marine with a trench gun clearing Japanese positions became iconic despite limited historical foundation. This cultural impact exceeds the weapon's actual combat contribution. The shotgun represented American pragmatism, using hunting weapons for military purposes regardless of European military conventions. This narrative appealed to American self-perception as practical innovators, unconstrained by traditional military thinking. The mythology served propaganda purposes, even if combat reality proved more complex. Japanese military culture, focused on rifles, machine guns, and artillery as proper military weapons, never incorporated shotguns into their warfare conceptualization. This cultural blind spot supposedly left them unprepared, though the historical record suggests their lack of preparation stemmed from the shotgun's limited actual employment rather than cultural oversight. The shotgun story illustrates the complex relationship between technology and military doctrine. The weapons themselves functioned as designed, devastating at close range with spreading patterns ideal for jungle combat. However, their successful employment required specific tactical conditions that rarely materialized in actual combat. Marine doctrine evolved throughout the Pacific War, but shotguns never achieved full integration into tactical systems. They remained supplementary weapons for specific situations rather than integral components of squad firepower. This doctrinal marginalization reflected practical combat experience rather than technological limitations. The contrast with successful weapon integration proves instructive. The BAR became central to Marine squad tactics with detailed doctrine for its employment. The flamethrower revolutionized bunker clearing, generating extensive tactical development. Shotguns, despite their theoretical potential, never prompted similar doctrinal evolution. Military administrative records provide another perspective on shotgun employment. Requisitions, repair reports, and replacement requests document weapon usage patterns. Rifle and machine gun parts appear constantly in supply records, indicating heavy use. Shotgun parts requests remain notably rare, suggesting limited wear from combat employment. Armorer reports from Marine divisions show similar patterns. Rifles and machine guns required constant maintenance from combat use. Shotguns primarily needed cleaning from storage corrosion rather than firing wear. These maintenance patterns indicate that most shotguns spent more time in arms rooms than in combat. Ammunition requisitions tell the same story. Divisions requested millions of rifle rounds and hundreds of thousands of machine gun rounds for operations. Shotgun shell requests remained modest, often for training rather than combat consumption. These administrative records corroborate the limited combat employment suggested by veteran accounts. Other nations' experiences provide context for evaluating American shotgun employment. British and Australian forces in the Pacific possessed minimal shotguns, relying instead on rifles and submachine guns for jungle warfare. Their combat effectiveness without shotguns suggests the weapons weren't essential for Pacific combat success.
Soviet forces fighting in varied terrain, from urban Stalingrad to rural Kursk, never adopted combat shotguns despite massive small arms production. Chinese forces engaged in close-quarters combat throughout their war with Japan similarly didn't employ shotguns despite desperate need for effective weapons. This international perspective suggests shotguns represented one tactical option among many rather than an essential combat capability. Nations achieved similar combat outcomes through different weapon combinations, indicating the shotgun's tactical impact remained marginal despite American production capacity. Post-war military analysis evaluated World War II weapons for future conflicts. The Army's Infantry Board conducted extensive studies determining which weapons merited continued development. Rifles, machine guns, mortars, and recoilless rifles received priority. Shotguns earned minimal attention, suggesting their World War II performance didn't justify major investment. The Korean War saw limited shotgun employment, despite extensive close-quarters combat. Marines in Korea carried M1 Garands, BARs, and carbines rather than shotguns for patrol operations. This practical choice by combat veterans of the Pacific War indicates their assessment of the shotgun's actual versus theoretical utility. Vietnam would see renewed shotgun use, particularly modified commercial models for jungle patrol. However, even in Vietnam's close-range combat, shotguns remained specialized weapons for point men and tunnel rats rather than standard armament. This pattern continues today with shotguns serving specific military roles rather than general combat. Conclusions. The historical record supports several conclusions about Japanese encounters with American shotguns in World War II. First, while shotguns were present in Marine units throughout the Pacific Campaign, their actual combat employment remained limited due to ammunition problems, tactical constraints, and doctrinal preferences. The March 1945 adoption of brass ammunition came too late to significantly impact combat operations. Second, Japanese forces never developed specific countermeasures to shotguns because they never achieved sufficient tactical impact to warrant special attention. The absence of shotgun references in Japanese military documents, training materials, and post-war analyses indicates their marginal role in determining combat outcomes. Japanese tactical evolution responded to American firepower generally rather than specific weapons like shotguns.
Third, the disconnect between authorized shotgun numbers and documented combat employment reveals the gap between theoretical capability and practical utility. While Marine divisions were authorized hundreds of shotguns each, most remained in secondary roles, guard duty, training, and rear area security, rather than frontline combat. Veterans' accounts, when they mention shotguns at all, describe them as useful for specific situations, but not as primary combat weapons. Fourth, the mythology surrounding Pacific War shotguns exceeds their documented historical impact. Popular culture has elevated shotguns to iconic status despite limited primary source evidence of their combat effectiveness. This myth-making obscures the more mundane reality that rifles, machine guns, mortars, and flamethrowers determined battle outcomes. While shotguns filled specialized niches, they never achieved the central role popular narratives suggest. The shotgun story offers broader lessons about military innovation and adaptation. Technical capability alone doesn't guarantee tactical impact. Weapons must integrate into doctrine, logistics, and training to achieve combat effectiveness. Shotguns possessed theoretical advantages, but failed to overcome practical limitations that restricted their employment. The Japanese military's failure to anticipate shotguns proved irrelevant because shotguns never achieved the tactical impact to exploit this oversight. Their lack of preparation reflected accurate assessment of the shotgun's marginal role rather than critical oversight. The weapons that actually determined Pacific War outcomes, artillery, naval gunfire, aircraft, flamethrowers, received appropriate Japanese attention. American industrial capacity to produce thousands of military shotguns demonstrated manufacturing prowess, but didn't translate directly to combat power. The ability to make weapons exceeded the ability to employ them effectively in Pacific conditions. This disconnect between production and employment illustrates that industrial might alone doesn't guarantee tactical advantage.